first of all. Thank you so much for joining to this very special event focused on skill-first approaches, trying to understand the goods and bads on this and trying to pave the way to understanding even more how these approaches can be implemented, the challenges, but also the opportunities that can bring into the labor market. I just want to also thank to all the people that are following online for joining to the event and for the people here in the room. I just want to give the floor to the head of the OECD Center for Skills, Elisa Mohamedou, who's gonna give the welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Ivan, and welcome everyone. I want to start by thanking LinkedIn, with whom we're collaborating on this project, and also Microsoft for hosting us in this beautiful setting. Apologies for those who are online, you're missing on a very nice building in the middle of Berlin. So as Ivan mentioned, we're meeting today actually to work. So we'll be presenting some aspects around skills-first approaches, but this is really to hear from you, what you think about it, how you see that there may be some stumbling blocks or perhaps opportunities around skills-first approaches. The reason why we're doing this is that there has been, of course, as you know, the labor market landscape changing, and with the skills shortages, this is an approach that is more and more being talked about, and in some cases actually implemented. And so we really want at the OECD Center for Skills to look into what that means, how it should be done, how it should not be done, what are the risks, what are the opportunities, short-term, long-term around this. What we really want to also is see this as an inclusive approach, because what we're seeing is that, as you all know as well, people are now presenting themselves very much around what they know, what they can do, and rather than just only about degrees when it comes to recruitment or also presentation. And so that's where we're also we'll be looking at LinkedIn data and other data sources where we look at how people are actually signaling their skills and how this affects their positioning within the labor market. And one of the reasons, of course, around this is around the skill shortages, sort of seeing this as an opportunity to increase the talent pool, but also people seeing this approach as a way of upskilling, reskilling, and a recognition as well of what it means to be a skilled and an unskilled person, which at the OECD Center for Skills, we really want to go away from this because it does not recognize what a lot of people can do. And so for us, this is an opportunity to also move away from that classification that also has an impact on how people want to engage in training or not, because it does have a certain stigma around it. And as you know, within OECD countries, we do have a challenge when it comes to people taking up training opportunities, even when they have the opportunity to do so. So that's really what we will be doing, trying to really look into more inclusive labor markets, closing the skills gap, and seeing really that people's skills are recognized. This is something that we have already just started the project, so we have little data at the moment around this, but we already saw that about 60% of OECD countries are showing some sign of progress when it comes to developing skills-first ecosystems. In some regions, particularly in the US, you can really see that this is much more advanced, where you have about 18 state levels organizations that are already looking into this as a process to increase the talent pool. So this is something that we really want to look into, and works as well within what the OECD is doing around improving assessments. And so improving assessments around skills of people and not just the academic pathway. We're doing this within other projects when it comes to the PISA vet, for instance, where we're trying to improve the assessment around vocational education and training students. So a whole ecosystem that we're trying to do to enhance, if you will, the opportunities, and seeing as well what we really see the skills ecosystem rather than just a very narrow past learning ecosystem. And with that, I'll hand over to Astrid. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much. My name is Astrid Auperle from Microsoft Germany, and I'm leading our social impact work. And this work focuses mainly on AI skills, providing AI skills at scale. And I think this also, that's why I really like also hosting you today. It's a pleasure for me to see all these interested guests here at Microsoft in our office. And when we're thinking about AI skills, it's more important than ever to be inclusive, as you said, and also to provide kind of a skills-first approach to really offer training opportunities for everyone. I think that's really the goal when we think about AI transformation of society, but also of the workforce. So I'm really glad to see you here. I'm glad to see the interested group of people to discuss opportunities for all of us. And I wish all of us a fruitful discussion today. So thank you very much for coming.
So thank you so much, Astrid. Thank you, Elisa, for the words. And let's just start on the topic. And I just want to introduce myself. I should have done so earlier. I'm Ivan Bornacelli. I'm a policy analyst at the OECD Center for Skills, and I'm leading the project on Beyond Degrees Empowering the Workforce in the Context of the Skill First. This project, as Elisa mentioned, has been conducted by the OECD Center for Skills with the collaboration of LinkedIn. And I just want to provide some context so you can understand the motivation behind of this. And I want to start with two key facts. The first one is that the demand for skills is changing, and this is changing very, very rapidly. This has resulted in employers facing difficulties to fill job postings and job vacancies, and this trend has been increasing in the last decade. Take Germany, for instance, that nearly 9 out of 10 employers are struggling to find the relevant talent, 4 more compared to 2015. Similar pattern can be seen in OECD countries. The second message is how, where, and what people learn is also changing. Alternative training pathway has gaining more relevance for developing skills, and at the same time, they are meeting the labor market requirements. Participation in non-formal and informal learning is higher than participation in formal learning in OECD countries, and has been increasing for all adults in the last decade. However, skills developed through these alternative ways are harder to recognize, are more difficult to showcase, which make harder for individuals to signal and to communicate. Then this just shows us that there is that's a room for different approaches, and this is where a skill-first approach comes in. Let me just give you an example of what do we mean by a skill-first approach. So we have here Rebecca and Luis. Both have 5 years of experience in the cybersecurity sector. However, only Rebecca holds a degree in computer science, and he had a master also in cybersecurity. Luis, on the other hand, is mostly self-taught, but has participated in multiple relevant short training programs in the cybersecurity sector, gaining also some certifications for some of them. Given how most hiring practices work, Rebecca would have more chances to be shortlisted, interviewed, and probably hired than Luis. This despite that both of them have the skills, the knowledge, and the experience to perform optimally in the role. That is what a skill-first approach is about. It's just bringing to the center of the discussion the skills into the hiring process and the career development. A skill-first approach encompasses 2 main components. One is a skill signaling, which refers to the way that individuals communicate and showcase their skills in the labor market. And the other side is skill-based hiring practices, which focus on the specific skills that are required, highlighting the specific skills that are required in the job. So let's have a look to what are the emerging trends of this skill-first approach in OECD countries. On the demand side, what we have seen that is that companies are dropping degree requirements to expand the candidate pool and fill more quickly job postings. In fact, data show that within OECD countries, 16% of recruiter searches use skill information to filter and screen the talent pool. This is compared to 5% for those that are looking only to degrees. In the case of Germany, it has a similar share, just slightly above of the OECD average. On the supply side, we find that more individuals are showcasing more skills. This means that in OECD countries, the likelihood of individuals signaling skills is being growing steadily over the past 5 years, especially after the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2024, the probability of adding skills to profiles has doubled compared to 2018. And at the same time, the average number of skills that are added into those profiles has been increasing from 10 to 15 in the last 5 years. When looking at the level of job posting with the skills and the level of job seekers' interest for jobs with the skills compared to those jobs with no skills, we found that OECD countries show different level of alignment of the skill-first approaches. So there is not a specific trend yet. Countries in the top right shows strong correlation between these two dimensions, which means that they are reflecting sort of a high mature skill-first market. In this point, we find countries such as the US and Lithuania. In contrast, at the bottom left side are countries such as Spain, Chile, and Italy, which are facing a skill transition stage where there is room for improving skills, first approaches, adopting from both sides mechanisms that support individuals and employers. As Elisa mentioned, there are signs that almost 2/3 of OECD countries are already showing sort of a progress in embracing a skill-first ecosystem. But at the same time, it's important to highlight that these metrics just reveal that there are need for and room for developing skills to encourage employers to adopt these skill-first approaches and first practices, and at the same time, developing policies to increase job seeker awareness about the existence of these skills-first roles and as well as skill signaling tools. Now let's look into who can benefit from these approaches and the angle that we explore the most in this particular project. First, focusing on skills allows individuals to have the chances to access to jobs that they otherwise couldn't get access to. In the EU, for instance, relaxing degree requirements could benefit 20% of the labor force, improving job matching employability. In other words, it will bring into the talent pool job seekers with upper secondary or less, which are the dark blue bar, and workers with upper secondary education or less that are searching for another job, which is the light blue bar. Also, relaxing degree requirements can expand the workforce by 2%. This means bringing individuals outside of the labor force due to unsuitable job availability, which is the orange bar. In the case of Germany, we're talking about 18 of the workforce who can benefit from these approaches. Finally, I would like to say that a skill-first approach could also contribute to diversifying the workforce. We have seen that, as I mentioned, the probability of skill signaling is being increasing. It still remains low, but people taking opportunity to signal their skills have been increasing steadily. This is particularly true among women, young adults, and individuals with high school or upper secondary education or less, who are the people who have faced more of the barriers in accessing accessing labor opportunities. So this is just a glimpse of the work that we have been conducting at the OECD Center for Skills, and that, of course, it will be enriched with the discussion that we will have later on during the day. Just want to thank everyone for your attention, and I now would like to give the floor to Nicola to Nicola. I'm sorry, to Enzo for the keynote speak. Thank you, Enzo, for joining, and I give the floor to you.
Okay, great. Thanks for the comprehensive introduction. That was really bringing many things forward, which are so much at the center of the discussion at the moment. It's really a great pleasure to be here, since you have also a really essential topic on the agenda. Maybe let me first ask you one question. Is there anybody here who is against skills? Anybody against high taxes? Okay, obviously such questions don't work. Of course, there's nobody against skills, because skills are positive, they are fashionable, they are the future. Everybody wants to have skills. The question about skills is never if, but it is how. And the how is important, since a skills first approach has considerable consequences for our formal education systems. That is the major point I want to talk about. And because this is the case, we have to look for the essential drivers. So what is really the hard facts which are putting forward the skills first perspective? And what does follow from these hard facts? How we have to implement such policies. I think this is really where things get interesting. Skills important in general is not interesting because anybody will tell that. So what is the game changes from the big trends from my perspective regarding skills policies? One obvious one has already been mentioned. Game changer number one, I think, is the economic transformation. So before I talk about AI, what is going on in the ecological transformation? So for a long time, we have thought that decarbonization, new mobility, also digitalization would destroy our jobs. We would run out of jobs in the end. Okay, at the moment, we are under pressure, no doubt. But in general, transformation does not mean a breakdown of employment. It means shifts, it means disruptions, it means changes. And for example, if we look at what happens with ecological transformation changes in Germany, then what we find is, okay, established areas are under pressure. But what we need for the green transition, this is, for example, in electrics, it's in energy, it's in machine building, it's in chemistry, and other typical German vocational occupations. So what is that? Why is that about skills? It's not about re-educating people. We still need the basic German strengths to say in manufacturing, but it's about finding new applications. It's about getting in up and coming areas. It's about developing further your skills for further applications, maybe in hydrogen or wherever. So it's not re-education, it's skilling in the green transition. And the same about digitalization. So if you think about digitalization, people say so often, okay, which new occupations will we have? Okay, you can always find new titles. We have long thought about digitalization as affecting the routine jobs in the middle. And okay, this is still happening. But of course, AI today affects also the high-skilled jobs. It's about journalists, it's about lawyers, it's about doctors, and so on. And again, we think, oh, that's something worrisome. A job affected by AI, I don't want to have that. But that's not the right perspective, because AI is not typical automation. AI gives you the chance to apply the technology within your job, to develop your own task profiles, to coin your job. So it's about how we apply technology in jobs and further develop these jobs. And therefore, what we see, which skills are needed in this context. Okay, of course, you find IT skills and AI skills. That's pretty obvious. And that's nothing connected to a certain occupation, but that's really cross occupation. But what you also find in many, many studies is more abstract things. It's abstract thinking, it's communication, it's process thinking, it's learning ability and so on. And okay, there is again a professor who says abstract thinking and learning ability and so on. What is that? In the end, it's exactly the tasks or the skills which are necessary if you want to take your job in your hand, if you want to develop your task profile, exactly what you're doing and how you apply technology. For that, you need these broader skills which go beyond occupational limits. Game changer number 2, demographics. Okay, demographics and skills, what is that about? Well, we know all developed countries are shrinking due to aging. For example, in Germany, over 15 years, we have minus 7 million in the labor force, just the aging effect. So that shows us that retaining older workers, keeping them on board and developing them will be so much more essential than in the 90s where we have thrown them out of the labor market. So how do we do that? Well, okay, if you look at those in academic occupations, their participation hardly shrinks until the retirement age. If you look at those in physically demanding jobs, it's totally different. So there, most people don't reach the 60 in their jobs. So should we all re-educate them? No, for 2 reasons. First, it is not realistic to re-educate many, many people in their 50s. Second, they will lose all their experience. We have to develop them into related areas where they can still use their skill sets and their experiences, but into areas which have a longer perspective to stay on the labor market. So this means we need a qualification wave exactly in the age of 50 plus, which is totally underrepresented in the whole debate. And exactly that is also a skill perspective. It's not a take a new occupation by going 2 years to vocational school, but it's really a skill perspective. Game changer number 3. It's not only about labor demand, it's also about labor supply. And labor supply currently is shaped by migration. In Germany, employment would already be shrinking without migration. So we need that. Everybody knows that we need that to offset the negative demographic effects. But if we look at what we make out of it, then that's not enough. So many, many migrants work below their potential. Getting into the first job is not that difficult anymore, but professional development is difficult. And many also go away again. Germany has a quite high immigration rate. So and all that, where does it come from? Of course, there are multiple reasons, but one is many people don't fit into the German education system. They have a different educational background and it simply does not fit. But skill can be a common language. So if we all speak skill, then integration is much easier. And if we all speak skill, then we have the chance to replace the hurdles from the past by a proactive, comprehensive service, which really recognizes skills, which further develops them in parallel to the job and leads in the end to a better professional development and integration. The same perspective we have with Germans. So the qualification requirements are increasing, but what is also increasing is the share of low skill, formerly low skill. The share has reached nearly 20% among youngsters now, despite the higher needs of qualification. So this shows us we need a more targeted approach. We also need low threshold approaches, where you say, okay, let's start with a low threshold with people who would not reach the full degree at once, and then have a flexible, a modular approach, how you can develop your skills further over your career and in parallel to your job. So this shows that skills first approaches does not necessarily mean we have less people in formal education. Skills first means more education, not less education. And this is also what I want to underline. So we have several big trends, game changers, which are really challenging our education systems. But skill first does not mean education second, quite the contrary. And I think this is what we should discuss. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to these chairs here.
Thank you very much, Enzo, and that was very inspiring. And I think I would, with this, ask the panelists here on the floor, and maybe you can sit down with me already. So I have. So we heard the inspiring discussion from Enzo Weber, who's a professor of economics and at IAB, so the research arm of the German unemployment insurance, and he does research there. You already saw my colleague Elisa Mohamedou, who's leading this work. And to my right, we have Christina Lena Cavallo, who's a senior lead manager for public policy and economic growth at LinkedIn, and she's very familiar with employment data and also looking at how the skills first approach works. And then to my left, we have Kjær Bathel, and she's at ReDi School of Digital Integration. And I think that is really specializing in the skills first approach by bringing disadvantaged populations to digital education and skills building. So I think you can really build on what we heard before and look into how a skills first approach can bring us more education, as you said, Enzo, and not less. I think my opening question, perhaps to you, to build on your speech, is a little bit, I think there is some research or emerging research, and it also came up in the report, that more and more with this fast technological change and AI, etc., formal degrees do become a little less important. So will this be an opportunity so that some people are able to just, they have some AI skills and they can sometimes even, the returns to these skills, if they can demonstrate them, can be higher than a formal degree. Would that be an opportunity to have this positive spiral, as you described it, between skills building and then more education, also formal education? Is that really a trend that's happening?
I think definitely yes, because we have these trends which are really going across occupations now, and they come from the demand and both on the demand and the supply side due to different technologies, due to different changes in the labor force. So therefore, I think we need the perspective of skill sets, but we also need the perspective or the strengths which are coming from the formal education system. And these combined can be stronger than the more inflexible system from the past, which is also under pressure. We see that in Germany, we have less and less young people in vocational training, for example. And for that, I think it's essential really to get on board or to manage the transition. We are living in Germany, so we are always asking who is responsible. And there are many people responsible for education in Germany. So one thing would be labor market policy. Bring together labor market policy in the green transition and the firms and the new firms in the up and coming areas to manage the transitions based on skills. That is one. It's about skill recognition. So the chambers and so on regarding managing the migration. It's about tailored vocational training. There you have also the firms on board and the vocational organizations. And in the end, my advice would be give formal education institutions a role in skill policies. So my dream would be to integrate the initial education system with a further integration system based on skill sets and based also on the same institutions. So it's not a different world, but it can be an integrated world.
I think you have to, we are group has to go around so that our, there's another one. Good. So we will take this one, the three of us, and you can take the other one. Very good. And yeah, what I did not do at the beginning, we're talking about skills, digital skills. We were struggling a bit with our digital skills, so I didn't get into the Zoom and but I did find a way to get access to questions online. So to the audience online, do be active with asking your questions, and then in the Zoom later, of course, we will collect questions too. But first of all, we'll continue to warm up within the panel. And yeah, with this, well, Enzo just said we're in Germany, right? And it's not only about who is responsible, but I mean, it's a high quality vocational system, but mostly initial vocational education. And as we've heard from Enzo and also from the talk, is that where we need additional skills is particularly the 50+ group, which is less present in continuing education. And in fact, well, I remember a colleague once commenting when I gave a talk on continuing education, well, I don't know, continuing education is a bit like a Yeti. Maybe it exists somewhere in Switzerland, but I've never seen it. So I mean, there's a lot to do to develop these skill building mechanisms, let me call it that way. And you look at many different countries, perhaps even Switzerland. What are the, the policy levers? How can we take these opportunities that skills as such seem to become more important on the labor market, and then, but also build an education system that integrates educational institutions, puts them at the center, and still makes sure that employers and education institutions work together to build this.
So I fully agree with Enzo. I think it's really, for us, it's not an either or. It's really a learning ecosystem. The way we've seen this advance well is particularly through the skill strategies. So for us, at the country level and regional level and even sectoral level, what's interesting is really to look at the governance and look at the different pathways to learning and to skilling people. And that goes through collaboration across all of the entities. So the academic, the government, the regional, the people as well. And so in civil society and unions. So it really is that building that ecosystem. That's important. The way we're seeing it also is that this is coming from both sides, right? So there's, of course, the skills shortages and the companies needing more and more people. But also, I think we shouldn't see people as commodities. People also themselves see the need to upskill and reskill because of the trends that are happening. We mentioned the digital transition. We do think in the OECD, we've done research that close to 30% of occupations may be at a high risk of automation. So there's that push. There's the other push of the green transition, of course. And that's coming also from the Eurobarometer, for instance, that shows that about more than half of the people think they don't have the skills to really be at the forefront of the green transition. So there's both these ways, right? So people and companies, the push and levers. So I think that's really important to see this way. There's an awareness about it. And if we put the right setup across collaboration, which does exist in quite a few countries that we've done these scale strategies, I think we can advance through that. So that's really for us how it is. It's not an either or.
And Christine, I think you've looked a lot, used LinkedIn data also to look at how a skills-first approach could help disadvantaged, I'm not sure whether that's the right word, but groups that are less successful on the labor market today, and you see the opportunities. And it would be great to hear what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I think Enzo already spoke about a lot of the groups that are underrepresented on the labor market, and we're seeing through LinkedIn data. So we're looking at the profiles of over 1 billion people globally. And we're seeing that particularly underrepresented groups on the labor market, including women, migrants, younger people, people without university degrees would really benefit over proportionally from a skills-based approach. So, for example, we know that generally. So I think also when we talk about talent shortages, the skills-based approach is, it's a very powerful lever to tackle that, at least to some extent. So we know that the talent pools on average increase by 10 times when we use a skills-based approach rather than looking at degrees or previous work experience. And we know that for women, for example, for jobs where women are underrepresented, their talent pool increases by 24% more than the talent pool of men when taking a skills-based approach. So there's a lot of talent that we're currently not leveraging to the full extent. And just to give you one example, in Germany, where, I mean, everywhere globally, women are underrepresented in the area of IT, right? And so we know that in engineering lead jobs, women at the moment make up 40% of all jobs in Germany. But the talent pool, if we would actually take a skills-based approach, in the talent pool for engineering roles, we would actually make up 35% if we take the skills-based approach. So there's a lot of skills that we're currently not using. And I think we just need to become a lot better in leveraging those existing skills. I mean, we spoke a lot about upskilling here, but even the existing skills we see on LinkedIn, we're currently not fully utilizing.
So you were talking about engineering skills. Those are usually required at university, right? How do you see those skills in LinkedIn when they're not acquired at university? How do you collect those data? And what are the skills? How are they being signaled?
So our members have profiles on LinkedIn where they list the job title, the education background. So the more traditional signals maybe on the labor market. But we also have a segment called skills where people can add their skills. And we do have over 41,000 standardized skills on LinkedIn. We have our own skills taxonomy that we use, which is constantly being updated. So we can always see what the latest developments are on the labor market. And we know which skills are required for what jobs. And we can also see how those skill sets change over time, right? So in engineering, you would not need the same skill set today that you needed 5 years ago. And that's actually really interesting to track because we're seeing that the pace of change on skill sets is actually increasing a lot. So between 2015 and today, the skill sets have changed on average by 25%. But going forward, and especially driven by AI and Gen AI, we expect that number to go up to 68% by 2030. So I think the focus on skills and constant upskilling, lifelong learning is really becoming a lot more urgent today.
Maybe before I go to the ReDi school, before I go there, I wanted to, because just to build on this, sorry. And because this is really interesting and I would like to build on it. So if there are these skills that are kind of there, but they're not really demanded, right? They don't result in job matches, or do they?
They're demanded. I think the problem is what Enzo said before, that the labor market still very much works on this old currency of job titles and previous work experience. But I think it's a huge opportunity if we look at skills. I mean, of course, not all of the skills this world needs are existing, but some of them are, and even that portion is currently not being utilized to the full extent. So I think there's the two things that we need to do. We need to ensure that we utilize existing skill sets much better. And then we also need to make sure that we skill people in, the skills that are in demand on the labor market.
But building on that, Enzo, because you come from the ERB and the German labor market and how job seekers find jobs. And I'm just thinking of an example actually of a good friend who has 20 years of experience in conceiving roofs, and in particular putting solar panels on roofs, but he doesn't have a formal qualification. He's from the Netherlands.
I need his address.
Huh?
Give me his address, please.
Yeah.
If he has free time.
But the point is, he's been searching for a job here in Berlin, and everybody who's in roof building, I don't know, how do you say that, roof building? Anyway, they will tell you, I have terrible skills needs. I cannot find anybody. And they will not even allow him to come by and demonstrate his skills. This is what, I mean, of course, it's an anecdote, right? I'm not sure what the empirical picture is, but you said that, right? That it's much on formal qualifications, etc. Now we're hearing a lot of skills are there. It's a wealth of skills that are not being utilized. This is kind of an anecdote that shows that. So how do you get there that employers will actually make use of skills that are there, but they're not certified?
Well, I think market power is quite a strong power in the end. So today we have the advantage. Okay, we are really at the moment in a recession, but in general, the labor market is as tight as it has never been, at least since the economic miracle. And still, but look at where we are coming from mass unemployment in the 2000s. So I think there is definitely something changing, but we need to push that further. And indeed, we do have the chance to do that. Since if you look at where are jobs filled from, where do people come from which are going into the filled jobs? Today, at more than 50% of the cases, it's other employment. In the past, it was unemployment, whatever. Today, they're really hiring from people who are in jobs. Okay, what does it tell us? Higher competition, yes, but higher competition gives us the chance to improve the matching, really to develop people through their employment career, really to the positions where you have the optimal match. And a prerequisite for that would be that you really can leverage the skill dimension.
But do you see it happening? Sorry, I mean, really. I don't see, empirically.
Empirically, so at least to what we see so far, the occupational flexibility. So there is quite a high occupational flexibility in many occupations. So this means many people don't work in the occupations they have once learned in the past. It has also been the case in the past, but the reasons may be changing. So in the past, it might have been out of necessity, simply because we find nothing in your occupations or whatever. Today, you might more take the positive chances out of that.
Anna, finally, it's you. And I think you have a lot to add. This is why, you know, we're waiting for the best in some ways. But I think you have a lot to add, because the ReDi School is really in that business, right? Building skills, not necessarily formally, for people who struggle perhaps to get opportunities to build their skills elsewhere. And I think you also have quite a few success stories. So now that I was despairing about my friend who cannot get an invitation to interview, I think you can add another perspective to that, right? Perhaps give us some hope.
I'll try. So ReDi School is a tech school teaching refugees and marginalized people all kinds of tech skills, so all the way from how does a laptop work, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. Because there are people coming to Germany, coming to Europe who don't know how a laptop works. And there's great opportunities and there's great need for also, a lot of them are women as well. So even today, if you want to work in nursing, you also need to know how does a Google or any kind of calendar work. So you really need the tech skills, even if it's low-end tech skills. Then we have all the way to high-end tech skills. So that's the cybersecurity. I was so happy that it was 2 women exemplified working in cybersecurity. That just makes me happy, because that's what the future should be looking like. And it shouldn't be, wow, finally somebody have understood women can work in tech. But the skills are so broad in technology. So at the moment, ReDi School is teaching about 100 different kinds of courses. We're teaching about 8,000 people per year. Since we started 2016 in the so-called refugee crisis, we've been teaching 25,000 people. So there's a lot of potential talent there. But one thing that I really learned from the beginning is we need to look at potential, but the most important thing is a learning curve. So how are people keeping up? Are they attending classes? Because logging into our courses or attending courses is just one indicator, but what's happening all the way to graduation? What do they do after graduation? And keeping track on that, and then focusing on quality education. I mean, it's one of the sustainable development goals. So we have made commitments and we want to see more quality in education. But how do we track that? How can we use the data that we have in order to make that happen and look continuously at that and make the matches to the job market and what is needed in the future? I think one of the great challenges that we have today is that when I talk to the schools, they say, if we want to implement changes, it will take around 7 years on average to change the curriculum in German schools. And we have to educate for the future. So we need to educate to where the puck is going, not where it is right now. And if that takes 7 years, we have a really serious challenge. And if the system takes time to change, which is why I think it's so important that we have extracurricular, like outside of the system, chances to educate. And that's what ReDi School does.
But do you see that employers are responsive, that they're, you know, that they value these skills because they know that it would take too long to acquire those skills in some formal sort of certification?
So we work with more than 100 partners who are looking for talent. And there's 149,000 available jobs in the German job market. And we can probably do the calculations relatively quickly and say how many billions of euros are being lost because we don't have access to talent. And that creates a very, very high incentive for the companies to look at their talent strategy and how do we get more people into the pipeline. So they're very willing to work with us, look at alternative pathways, but there's a lot of challenges still because they're looking for talent, but they're working for senior talent, or they're looking for experienced talent. And that's the biggest hurdle that I hear from my students when they say, you know, I want to apply for an entry-level job, and the entry-level job requires 2 years of experience. There's something wrong in that calculation. And maybe you bring it from a different field. So maybe you're working as a lawyer in Syria. You have now upskilled and do cybersecurity at ReDi School. But then for the entry-level job, you haven't worked in the cybersecurity industry yet. So we need to change. We need to have a continuous dialogue. That's why these panels are so important, because only through that ecosystem play, we can up the market.
Thank you for that appeal. But it's surprising, I still think, as an economist, or maybe we're too simple-minded as economists, you'd think that employers change much faster because they are facing these skills needs. And to start taking up some questions from the online audience, and I think that's very fitting here. So Anne said, well, it takes much too long to integrate new skills into formal German curricula. And I think that is really the weakness. The strength is that the quality control is really good. It's well aligned with employers' needs, but to come up with a formal 3-year education, it takes long because there are so many players. So from the audience, the question came, well, what's the future for micro-credentials and partial qualifications? German, and I think Enzo can testify to that, German social partners are really struggle with that. But maybe it's the future still, because they're going to see that skills change so fast, as Christine's skills needs change so fast, and they somehow have to adapt the system. What do you see in Germany? What do you see in other countries in terms of micro-credentials and partial qualification?
So we do see that that is actually this whole modular and stackable way of acquiring skills is, of course, a really good entry point in that in this area. So it is seen particularly when we're looking at people who, from themselves or from the push they see from the labor market, see that they need additional skills in other areas. So that is happening. I think the point that you were mentioning is also we need to work on the human resources of employers. That's where one of the stumbling blocks is, where a lot of them keep, and I'm glad that we have some today in our workshop. We'll be discussing with them how we can remove those hurdles, because for a lot, that is the easy way of saying, okay, I tick the box of that degree. I know the person has the skills. How can we comfort them that you can also take people who have these micro-credentials, people who have the alternative learning routes also. So I think there's one way to work around the employers in that. For us, certainly, that is micro-credentials. And that really shows that education is not a false currency. I don't think it is, actually. It is very much important. So it's not, and again, going back to either or, it's more about how we help people also stack up these skills as they move along, and as we see that the labor market is changing, and as we see that they need to continue being in the labor market also longer through the aging process and retirement policies changes in a lot of the OECD countries. So I think that's where it is. So for us, it is absolutely working. And actually, that's where we see the learning ecosystem work well, because a lot of the academic institutions are themselves investing in micro-credentials and doing it. We did this work on cybersecurity. That's one sector, of course, where that works quite well, and the uptake is. The point now is to diversify the sectors in which that type of micro-credential uptake is easier, not just in the IT sector.
And I think, so the online audience is very active. I can hardly follow, but the on-site audience is also invited to comment, in particular if we have HR managers in the audience. It would be great to hear from you, or also online, you know, if you have comments, because we all seem to be agreed they need to be more flexible, they need to be more open to other skill, credentials, let's say, not only the formal ones, but perhaps some people beg to disagree. And related to this, Christina, I have two questions for you also from the audience. So there was somebody asking, so do you think that this kind of skill self-representation in some ways that we have on LinkedIn could be sort of I don't know how they formulated it, but the way I understand it is sort of another way of certifying skills. Could that be the future? And perhaps linked to that, somebody else asked, well, this is very academic. Can you become a bit more concrete? Most employers are really small. How are they going to react to those trends, how are they going to use what use this skills first approach in order to find the kind of people that they need?
I mean, we're definitely seeing this trend of a skills-based labor market on LinkedIn already. So we're seeing that our members are adding a lot more skills today than they did previously. So just to give you an example, in the last 12 months, LinkedIn members have added 680 million skills to their profiles in total, which is an increase of 80% compared to the year before. So I think people are starting to understand that this is a very important signal. And I think people see also that employers and recruiters are responding to that signal. So we, a lot of our customers who use LinkedIn to find talent, they're starting to use skills as the signaling mechanism instead of looking at degrees and previous work experience. So I do think that we're already on the way to this more skills-based labor market. But of course, change does take time. So I think we're just in sort of the very early phases, but I do think it is very important for individuals to add their skills, I mean, to their LinkedIn profile, but also when you apply for a job, speak about your skill set, be aware of your skill set, because I think often we think about our educational background, we think about the work experience, but we don't necessarily think about the skills that we have. So I think it's important to really emphasize that in the application process, but then also for employers to start thinking about that more. But it's definitely a trend that we are seeing sort of growing larger on LinkedIn.
Just to add, actually, what we've seen is that some of the employers, 14%, I think now, and colleagues can correct me, are using skills filters on LinkedIn, and only 2% of the employers are only using the education filters. So there's already a move there. And I think to your question, SMEs, I think in particular, have historically been using skills first hiring in the past. It's just, it is now being called this way, but this is actually a group of employers who have in the past been hiring based on skills rather than academic. A lot of them have. So I think it's more of a question now that we are categorizing it this way, but it is not a completely new trend. It has been happening, particularly for SMEs.
Maybe just since we're not talking about LinkedIn data, Christian and I built something together. It's called the ÜBER LinkedIn reallocation radar, and it shows you what is going on regarding sector changes. So regarding people changing the sector of their employment, and also regarding where they apply. So that's a really leading indicator. And the surprise was, it was really going down, despite COVID, despite the crisis, despite the transformation we're in, was really going down. So great resignation, big quit, and something like that. It was US. In Germany, it was the big white news or so. Let's see. At least regarding the sector. So regarding the reallocation, there's not too much going on. Regarding competition in general, yes. But regarding this transformative character, not too much at the moment. So in November, we'll have the next update. So just be aware of that. It will be important news.
Maybe because oh, okay. I'll ask one question and then pull you in. Okay. Are you an employer?
No, I'm a researcher.
Okay. I'll bring you yeah, because I wanted to pull in two more questions from the audience, and because it was so much fun to do employer and HR hiring manager bashing. No, just to think a bit more. Because there was one question, well, two questions. One was to Enzo, really, but I think it would be interesting to hear you too, because you have populations in your group, well, you wouldn't, you know how to deal with populations who have a disadvantage at the start, let's say. And so the person was asking, okay, fine, there's all these skill shortages, but what if? So Enzo said, so many people have to retrain, build their skills in order to stay, to progress further, stay in the market, etc. But what if in this really, really, in these professions where you have a huge shortage, and I think it is happening today, like care workers or education workers, that the personnel is so scarce that their employers won't give them time to retrain. And linked to that, somebody asked, well, if we really think 40 to 50%, I think it was, Enzo said that, or it was came from the report, of 50, 40 plus workers have to be retrained or get some training every once in a while. Do we have to make it mandatory for it to work? What do you think? What's your hunch?
Well, generally speaking, I work with people who are unemployed and who come here. So we work with people from 138 different countries, and they leave their home countries not because they want to, but because they have to, because their life and their family's life are in danger. So they're coming here with a very big incentive to work because they need to make money to take care of themselves and to take care of their families here, or send money back home because the prices are going up in Syria and people can't survive. So their inner driver to get a job is huge, but they're meeting so many obstacles and they are working on it. And ReDi School has been co-created with refugees from the very beginning to make sure that the education that we are building makes sense for them in their lives. And one of the biggest learnings very early on, and this is now almost 10 years ago, was how busy refugees are in terms of trying to get by, filling out German papers, going to integration centers, going to the job center. They're busy all the time. So what we realized was, when do our students have time to study? In the evening. That's why we do evening classes from 6 until 8 or 9 o'clock. That's why our women courses are on the weekend, because one of the insights were the women are so busy also with their kids. We need to provide childcare. So we have childcare. We are tech school, but we also have childcare because that was necessary. We also realized, no, we can't be teaching on Sundays. Why? Because many of the women were Christian. They're going to church. Good. So we do it on Saturdays, but it's very, very important to have that user-centered approach because they have lives. And if we want education to fit into their lives, we need to start thinking about how to design this learning experience. That's for my target group. And that's what I think employers should be doing as well. If they want to upskill or reskill their labor force, they need to talk to their employers. It sounds so fundamental, but so many times, maybe there was a survey once upon a time, but it didn't really go into the design of the learning experience.
I think that's a good point. I first thought you were not going to answer my question, but in some ways
I
you
did.
Yes, you did. You took a detour. But now I'm going to go into my audience here, because the first person, please introduce yourself. And then...
Yes, thank you. So my name is Kjær Hornberg. I'm a research fellow at the Social Science Center of Berlin in the department Skill Formation and Labor Markets. And so our, like working with the PIAC data a lot, our focus of the research has definitely also been showing really the different educational attainment, right? Educational degrees is not the same as skills. So it's great to have this opportunity to share some of these insights today. But I have two questions. The first, now from the panel discussions where you were kind of taking up, well, there is kind of a trend of employers to focus more on skills rather than degrees. I was still wondering, because for us, being sociologists, the focus is of course on the most disadvantaged, right? The less educated, those that have no degrees or even lower secondary level degrees. And I was kind of wondering how inclusive is this really? Are we not rather talking about, okay, tertiary educated, it's not so important anymore whether you have a sociologist degree or a computational scientist degree when you, for example, worked in sociology doing data analysis. And that's why there is more mobility now, but it's not in a sense inclusive that really people coming from a low education background now get integrated. I was just kind of also wondering this when at the very beginning we saw the slides. I was a bit surprised to see Lithuania as a as a pioneer, as a skills pioneer, because for example, in our results, Lithuania has the biggest further training gap or the biggest disadvantage for less educated workers. So that was one question I would have. How inclusive is skills first at the moment? And also the other point, which is probably one of the main insights from our research, I kind of had the feeling the role of the employers was until now very much discussed in the allocative process. So allocating people coming from education into the labor market. And I completely agree with this. What we find when we then get to one of the possible solutions, further training, what we do see there that in fact, inequalities in further training access are not driven anymore so much by individual competencies, individual motivation. So it's not so much about individual agency, but training opportunities are very much integrated in jobs, right? Employers are the main providers of further training, and they integrated the opportunities into certain jobs. And since we know like less educated workers have not achieved the highest level jobs, so it's a circle. It's a bad circle for them that they have not. They have bad labor market allocation, and due to this, no access. So how would you integrate or see the role of employers in really providing further training opportunities and moving more to this skills approach and moving beyond labor market allocation and jobs? Thank you.
Thanks, Carla. And I'm going to take a walk around more if you have questions, but for the moment, for the camera, I think I should be here. Those were many questions, but one is on Lithuania for you, definitely. And I want to ask Christine after this too. So the question is this more inclusive way of integrating skills that are not necessarily certified. Is that something for university educated people?
So I think you're right on two grounds. So one is indeed in some countries, particularly when we look at the US, it is a way of making the entrance to the job market more inclusive. And so when you have the federal states as removing the bachelor requirement for jobs, that in and of itself increases the inclusion, since 60% of the population doesn't have a bachelor degree. So that is there for sure. The other point that is very true that you're mentioning is that when we look at the micro-credential data, the ones who go into it are the higher educated. So the ones who go into this modular, stackable, micro-credentials and so on already have an education. So that's what we want to see in terms of, is skills first hiring helping only for the first entry job, or does it help further down the lane? And I think that's the important part. We do think it does, because the more varied you show the skills and the more sort of you open up the understanding of what a skills use is in one sector compared to the other, and how actually it is applicable. And we're not only talking about technical skills, and I think that's important as well, because the more we talk about the jobs of the future, we talk about these other transferable skills, and that's where in the past it hasn't been very good in terms of signaling those, and you can signal those through your learning path and your career path differently, including when it wasn't informal employment. So I think that's where we think that there is a possibility of seeing this inclusiveness, but it will require the research that we've just started with.
I mean, just to add, maybe one example of, because you were talking about the sort of lower skilled people, and I mean, I think everybody has skills. They might not have been acquired through formal education or on the job, but I mean, even in our private lives, we all have skills. And I think you made a very important call out. It's not just technical skills we're talking about. There's soft skills as well, right? The people skills. And I think those will become increasingly important, especially as we're sort of going into this age of AI. So we see that communication skills, team management skills. Those skills are becoming increasingly more important. But so what we look at is also how skills of different jobs are similar. And sometimes you can see sort of surprising similarities between jobs, which are not super obvious at the sort of the first glance. And so one example that we found during COVID was actually that bartenders have very similar skill sets to customer service jobs. And so we saw a lot of those transitions actually during COVID when, a lot of bars and restaurants were closed down. So I do think that a skills-based approach is actually very inclusive, especially for lower skilled people, because they might not have the sort of traditional signals like a degree of sorts, but everybody has skills. And I think it's more that we're not so used to talking about that or thinking about that.
You want to jump in, and then I have more questions.
I'll try to make it brief. One of the biggest challenges I hear from my students is that they have studied abroad and then their certificates are not recognized in Germany. So I think there's a huge challenge for the government to understand how can we certify these skills that are there. They're even degrees from universities, they're just not recognized in Germany. And then hopefully on the top of that, then how do we get certification of the skills, be it soft skills or hard skills that people have? But the last thing I really want to focus on as well, it's what we call at ReDi School, 50% of getting a job is what you know, 50% is who you know. And the importance of network, and if I did a quick survey around here, probably most of you would say, how did you get your recent job or your previous job? It was probably through a friend or somebody that you knew. It probably wasn't by sending in an application. But that's my assumption right now. But this is when we talk to people and try to understand how did you land your first job, it's because somebody recognized them and made a recommendation. When you arrive as a refugee and you don't have a network, then it's very, very hard for somebody to make a recommendation for you. If you spend the first 2 years in a refugee camp with other refugees who are not in jobs, then who's going to open that door for you? And that's why at ReDi School, we do have some certified teachers, but the majority of our teachers are tech experts who work already in the industry, who decide to spend 2 hours every week to come and teach our students. Because when you have a teacher from LinkedIn or from Microsoft or from a startup, and they see the talent of Mohammed and Luna and their steep learning curve, it's very easy to make that recommendation to the HR department to maybe consider having lunch with our students. And that is what is transferring people into jobs.
Thank you. You mentioned a very important signaling device, or not signaling device, but a resource to land jobs, which is relations, real or on LinkedIn, probably better real. But Enzo, a link to all this, and maybe you want to re-clarify, because I got some questions, doubts, let's say, about what we were discussing and also what you said. So one person said, and I think that's an interesting thought, well, it's a true and tried approach to put qualifications first. The question is, of course, why wouldn't you recognize foreign qualifications? Because you don't know them. And also, this person said, they kind of signal transversal skills, having been able to acquire a qualification, stamina, I guess. And so how else could these skills be signaled if it's not through formal qualifications? And then somebody else asked, do you really, and there was a question specifically to you, do you really want to replace higher education with a micro-credential skills first approach? I don't think that is what you said. But finally, to wrap it all up, somebody else said, well, and that's something that you said in your speech, skills first doesn't mean less education, it means more education. Perhaps you can elaborate on that again, what you said and what you didn't say, and also how you signal what you signal today through qualifications through something else, if you think that should be the case.
Yeah, definitely. I hope that this was one outcome of my speech, that our formal education system, that there is a reason behind it, that it has clear strengths and clear channels where it is also successful. Signaling is one. Setting targets you can really follow is another. Setting standards is another. So there is very much in favor of the system. And we also have to say that especially the German qualification system, it does not perform bad. So, for example, if you look at youth unemployment, of course we do have problems, but we also have clear success, and we shouldn't give that up simply by chance or so. But we also see that it has certain weaknesses simply because it's a formal system, and it's of course it's a traditional system. And the last step indeed is what can we do to reinforce this system? At the moment, it's not that it's becoming better and better, but it's getting more and more under pressure. Since 2017, I think we have more vacancies in vocational education than applicants. So it's not that it's that attractive and everybody wants to go there. At the moment, we really have difficulties. And so we should look for opportunities, how we can reinforce the system and to combine it with a skill perspective, which is more adaptable, but in the end, even may lead to higher standards. I think that is something so attractive. We should take that chance. And by the way, speaking politically, if you know the German political sector in the education systems and so on, then you know there are so many strong institutions which have a historical background and so much experience and so much power in that it's extremely important to use that power, not to counteract that power, but to use that power. And then you can be successful in Germany, I'm convinced.
I also want to strive that there's a lot of education going on for unemployed people supported by the job centers. But one of the biggest challenges is who is getting these vocational vouchers. Because in our experience, when we sent 300 potential applicants, together with Kjær, who's also in the room, to the job centers, 3 people came back with vocational vouchers, allowed to study, and our break-even was 7, so we couldn't start the course. And then we've been talking to other tech schools, trying to understand who gets these vocational vouchers. And when Germans go there, it's about 50–60%. When expats like myself, I'm originally from Denmark, when we go there, it's about 30%. When refugees go there, it's about 2 or 3%. So there's a very systemic challenge. And I'm not saying that the system is racist, but there's a lot of things that needs to be improved. Because if we want to get the marginalized people into work, they need to upskill and they need to reskill. But then they also need the chances, the vocational vouchers to do that. And then it can't be that one individual at the job center says, you're too old, you're too young, you're a woman, or whatever. There's so many challenges. And this is what we're grappling with every day. I had to close down my programs in Berlin. I invested 40,000 euros in doing, like, just as AZAV certification, it's called. I closed it after 4 years of investing into this because I was not getting students who wanted to study with us. At the same time, in the jobs where I don't need these vocational vouchers, my list of attendees is as long as my waiting list. I could be double as big at ReDi School right now if I just had access to the financial resources. And this is where we really need to go in and see how does the system and the actors in education working outside of the system, how can we play better together?
That's a very important final plea. I ate a lot into your coffee break. I hope we can extend it towards the end a little bit, but I want to thank the panelists. I think this was a really good group, giving us the different aspects, showing us that where the opportunities of a skills first approach. So there's a lot of hidden talent and skills. There's a lot of hidden or revealed willingness to learn. And what we need now is and there's also a need for fast changing skills on the employer side. What we seem to need is an educational system that can integrate this with its formal qualifications that have also their their value and bring skills to the forefront, whether they're certified formally or not. And with that, I open the discussions in the coffee break and have a good continuation. I think there's a lot more to discuss.